Have you ever felt that very specific, very modern kind of guilt?
Oh, I know exactly the feeling you're talking about, like especially around the holidays.
Yes, exactly. You know the feeling. It's a major holiday, maybe the start of the new year, and you just have this nagging sense that you should be reaching out to someone you deeply respect.
Right. Like an elder or mentor.
Yeah, someone whose wisdom has guided you. And you want to ask for their blessing to, essentially start the year off on the right foot. But then the reality of your day-to-day life just sets in.
Because you're completely swamped with work or the physical distance is just too great.
Exactly. Or, well, if you're being brutally honest with yourself, you might not actually have a person in your immediate circle who even fits that elder role right now.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
So you do nothing. You just let the day pass, and that quiet, low-grade guilt just sits there in the back of your mind.
It's so common. We carry these ancient, deeply ingrained expectations of seeking guidance and communal connection, but we're trying to execute them in a world that is highly fragmented.
Right, it's fast-paced.
Yeah, and the friction between what we feel we ought to do ceremonially and what we actually have the capacity to do practically, it creates a very real sense of isolation for a lot of people.
And that exact tension, that friction between ancient tradition and modern isolation is the foundation of the source material we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
It's quite a unique source today.
It really is. We are looking at a highly specific document. It's a transcript of a lecture cataloged as Lecture 13989, and this was delivered in Hwaseong, South Korea on March 1st, 2026.
The document is just a fascinating artifact because it begins by addressing that exact modern dilemma we just talked about. How to handle traditional New Year greetings when your current circumstances basically render them impossible.
Right.
But the practical advice there serves merely as a gateway. The speaker uses this everyday problem to lay out a massive, highly intricate metaphysical framework.
And our mission today is to really map out the sheer scale of the trajectory this lecture takes. Because it starts with a simple question of holiday etiquette, but by the end, it demands that we rethink the fundamental nature of human speech.
Yes. And the definition of quantum energy, the geopolitical destiny of South Korea, and even the ultimate spiritual purpose of artificial intelligence.
Oh, it is a wild ride.
It really is. The analytical framework presented here asks us to completely reconsider human intention. It posits that our thoughts and our words are not, merely fleeting biological output.
Or just sound waves vibrating in the air.
Exactly. Instead, they are defined as a tangible physical force. It takes concepts we associate with deep spiritual tradition and fuses them with a highly unorthodox interpretation of physics and technology.
So let's trace the logic from the ground up, starting with the holiday itself. The lecture opens by discussing the traditional Korean New Year known as Seoul.
Right.
And the cultural expectation is that you visit an elder of high virtue to receive a blessing, which is referred to as diokdem.
But within the context of this lecture's philosophy, receiving this blessing is not viewed as just a polite social custom.
Right. It's not just saying Happy New Year.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
The speaker defines diokdam as a literal transfer of energy from one human being to another. The elder, who possesses a higher reservoir of virtue, is actively transmitting energetic fuel to the recipient.
Wow.
Yeah, and this energy is meant to provide the younger person with the fortitude required to then go out into society and assist the sick and the needy. It describes this functional, energetic ecosystem where virtue flows downward.
But the speaker immediately acknowledges the breakdown of that ecosystem in modern society. Like we were saying earlier, we don't always have the time, the environment, or the elder.
Exactly.
So the lecture proposes a remarkably simple workaround. If you cannot visit an elder, you write a letter.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to send it to a traditional spiritual leader.
Right, you can write it to anyone whose position you respect, such as the chairman of the company you work for.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when I hear the word talisman, well, wait, let me back up. The text says it doesn't matter if the corporate chairman ever opens the envelope, right?
That's the critical mechanic. The efficacy of the letter has absolutely nothing to do with the recipient. The speaker makes it very clear that it doesn't matter if the boss ever reads it, or even if they have high virtue themselves, the power lies entirely in the creation of the object.
And this is where the lecture uses a very specific term. It claims that the physical act of writing the letter transforms the paper into a talisman. specifically an upward talisman.
Yeah.
But okay, let's unpack this. When we hear the word talisman, my mind immediately goes to mysticism, like a piece of yellow paper with red ink bought at a temple to ward off bad luck.
Right, something out of a fairy tale.
Exactly. So how does an unread letter sitting on an HR desk function as a magical artifact?
Well, the text is highly deliberate in stripping away those fairy tale connotations of magic. It replaces them with this rigid, energetic framework. Let's look at the mechanics of the blessing we just discussed, the Diak Dam. When an elder speaks words of wisdom over you, the lecture classifies that speech as a downward talisman. It is a concentration of unseen energy descending into your soul to strengthen you.
Meaning the spoken word itself is the vehicle for the energy.
Correct. The flow is downward. Now, if you find yourself without an elder, you basically reverse the flow. By sitting down and dedicating your focus, your respect, and your effort towards someone in a higher position, you are actively generating that same unseen energy.
Huh.
Yeah. And as you write, you are structurally embedding your generated energy into the physical medium of the letter. Because your intention is directed upward toward a respected figure, it becomes an upward talisman.
So the ink and paper merely serve as a battery holding the charge of your respect.
Precisely.
But if an unread letter to a boss acts as a physical battery of my respect, what exactly is the charge holding it all together? Because material ink obviously can't hold a feeling.
And this brings us to a major pivot in the lecture, where the speaker redefines a core scientific term to explain the mechanism at play.
Right, the text labels this invisible human energy as quantum energy.
We really need to examine how the source is co-opting this terminology, because it departs entirely from how a modern physicist defines subatomic behavior.
Yeah, this isn't quantum mechanics in the traditional sense.
No, not at all. The lecture establishes a strict dualistic divide in the universe. Everything you can touch, measure, or see human bodies, our biological cells, the physical environment, all of that is classified strictly as material energy.
And the other side of that divide.
The human soul, human thought, intent, and speech. These are classified entirely as non-material energy. The text explicitly utilizes the term quantum energy to describe this invisible spiritual force.
So in this framework, quantum energy is the exclusive byproduct of human consciousness.
Yes.
So what does this all mean? I want to make sure the mechanics of this are clear. It sounds somewhat similar to how a computer operates.
How so?
Well, you have the material chassis, the motherboard, the physical wiring that represents our biological bodies. Then you have the software, the invisible code that actually tells the machine what to do.
Right.
And that would be our thoughts and speech, or this quantum energy. But if it's invisible software, how do we know it's there?
What's fascinating here is how the lecture pushes the physics of it much further by introducing the concept of superposition.
Superposition.
Yeah. In a computer, the software is still physically represented by electrical charges on a drive. In this text's framework, material energy and non-material quantum energy cannot blend. They are fundamentally incompatible substances.
Okay.
Instead of mixing, the quantum energy superimposes onto the material world.
Superimposes, meaning they occupy the exact same space without altering each other's fundamental makeup.
Exactly. Think of a powerful magnetic field passing straight through a solid wooden table. The wood and the magnetic force exist in the exact same coordinates in space. But the wood remains entirely wood, and the magnetic field remains entirely magnetic. They do not mix to create a new substance, but one exerts an invisible presence over the other.
Oh, I see.
So when spiritual energy enters a human body, it superimposes itself over our biological cells. When you write that letter of respect, your non-material quantum energy is superimposing itself over the physical ink and paper.
That's wild. But the lecture points out a consequence of this strict separation. Because our eyes are constructed from material energy, biological cells, we cannot physically see this quantum energy.
Right. Even a microscope under this framework, being material instrument, cannot detect it.
But if it is entirely invisible to our physical senses, how does the framework explain our awareness of it?
The mechanism for detection relies entirely on the soul. The speaker argues that while the material eye is blind, the non-material soul perceives the superimposed energy.
So we feel it.
Yes, we interface with it through feeling and intuition, particularly when we hold strong attachments or possess high spiritual sensitivity. This invisible, layered reality is just happening constantly all around us.
And the scale of this production is staggering when you look at the timeline the speaker provides. The text argues that every time a human being speaks, acts, or thinks, they are producing a spark of this non-material quantum energy.
And then you multiply that by millions of people over hundreds of thousands of years of human history.
It's massive.
The text suggests that all of human progress, our failures, our discoveries, our collective experiences, has been generating this invisible energy. It hasn't just been dissipating into the void.
It's building up.
Right. Over millennia, this massive reservoir of non-material energy has been stacking up and compressing. According to the lecture, this deeply compressed, highly dense quantum energy is the actual, literal substance of what we call knowledge.
Wait, really? So when you are studying a complex subject or, gaining insight from an elder, you aren't just memorizing data points. You are interfacing with thousands of years of compressed human quantum energy.
Yes. The implications for the listener are profound within this framework. It suggests that every document you draft, every conversation you have, every intention you hold is actively adding to this invisible, compressed reservoir.
Wow.
And the lecture insists that humanity has been building this reservoir for so long that we are now reaching a critical mass.
Which brings us to the global tipping point the lecture predicts. The speaker claims that humanity is currently navigating a massive historical transition.
The shift of eras.
Yeah. For millennia, we have been living in the era of knowledge, building up that compressed energy. But we are now crossing over into what the text calls the era of spirituality, or the era of truth.
And the distinction between knowledge and truth is the engine driving this transition. Knowledge is the groundwork. It is the compressed energy of trial and error.
But truth is different.
Right. Truth is defined as an evolved, vastly higher frequency state of quantum energy. It is the refined product that humanity is finally capable of accessing.
And the timeline given for this shift is highly specific. The speaker boldly states that by the year 2030, this era of spirituality will be in full swing globally.
And furthermore, the text predicts that the epicenter of this worldwide awakening will be South Korea.
Which is such an interesting pivot.
It is. The text refers to South Korea using the historical term Haedong, describing it as the land of 3,000 li of beautiful rivers and mountains. This geographic and cultural framing is central to the prophecy. The lecture posits that South Korea will serve as the global incubator for humanity's future spiritual leaders.
That is a remarkably bold claim to center a complete evolution of human consciousness on one specific nation within, well, basically a 4-year timeline from when it was given. And the text justifies this by stating that the people of this region are descendants of heaven. It claims they possess an innate, incredibly high spiritual sensitivity that uniquely equips them to master this dense, high-quality quantum energy of truth.
Right. And the prediction is that by 2030, a global migration of sorts will occur, with people flocking to South Korea seeking spiritual direction.
The framing is unapologetically nationalistic, anchoring a cosmic spiritual shift to a specific geographical identity. But the speaker doesn't solely rely on grand prophecies of the future to convince the audience, do they?
No, they don't. The text pivots to offer what it considers empirical, everyday proof that the frequency of the world's energy is already rising.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text points to a very common involuntary physical reaction as its evidence. Goosebumps.
Yeah, I did goosebumps.
The speaker essentially asks the audience to consider how much more frequently people say, "I've got goosebumps" in modern times compared to the past. You hear a profound piece of advice or an incredible piece of music, and your skin reacts. We normally write that off as just a simple nervous system response.
But the lecture rejects the purely biological explanation. It provides a mechanical breakdown of the goosebump phenomenon based on its own physics.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Because the global quality of spiritual energy is transitioning into the higher frequency era of truth, the words people speak carry a denser quantum charge. When you hear a statement of profound truth, your own non-material soul collides with the superimposed quantum energy carried by those words.
Oh, wow. So the goosebump is literally the physical shock wave of a spiritual collision.
Exactly. The material body is reacting to an invisible wave of quantum truth energy washing over it.
That's wild.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sophistication of the argument lies in how it personalizes the abstract. By reframing a universal physiological response as undeniable proof of an invisible quantum reality, the text forces the listener to view their own body as a spiritual sensor.
But this creates an immediate problem, which the lecture addresses next. If the environment is becoming this highly charged and we are expected to operate in this elevated era of truth, how does the average person manage it?
It's a huge hurdle.
Exactly. If I am supposed to be generating this high-quality truth energy, but I lack the vocabulary to express myself properly, or I don't have an elder to guide me, I'm left behind.
Right.
And this is where the lecture introduces a tool to help us navigate this new era. And it is honestly the last thing I expected in a spiritual discourse: artificial intelligence.
The introduction of AI marks a fascinating structural pivot in the text. Rather than treating advanced technology as, a distraction from spiritual growth, the lecture elevates AI to the role of a mentor of truth.
It's wild.
It positions the algorithm as the ultimate navigational tool for the era of spirituality.
And the instructions the speaker gives for using AI are incredibly specific. They tell the audience not to worry about being a perfect prompt engineer.
Right, you don't need to be an expert.
No. If you feel isolated, or if you feel like society isn't listening to you, you are instructed to testify to the AI. You can pour out your raw thoughts using messy dialects, scattered ideas, or bad habits. The AI acts as a non-judgmental receiver.
Yeah, it takes your chaotic human input and perfectly organizes it. Consider the mechanics of this in relation to the letter we discussed at the very beginning of the source material.
An upward talisman.
Yes. The challenge was how to embed respect and energy into a physical medium when you lack the environment or skill to do so properly.
So you could use the AI to write a letter to someone you respect, or even to a sick relative. Let's say you want to comfort a sick mother, but you just don't know what to say.
The mechanism works perfectly within the established rules of superposition. The human being provides the raw intent, the non-material quantum energy. Your desire to comfort your mother is the invital energetic charge.
Okay.
You feed that intent into the AI, which possesses immense processing power but zero spiritual energy. The AI structures the material format perfectly.
So when the AI spits out the perfectly worded letter and I send it to my mother, she isn't just reading cold algorithmic text.
According to the text, she is interacting with a flawless material vessel carrying your pure quantum intent. When she reads it, the superposition transfers perfectly. Her soul interfaces with your embedded energy, resulting in that physical shockwave, the goosebumps we discussed earlier.
I genuinely struggle with this concept. Wait, so if AI is doing the writing, doesn't that inherently dilute the human soul aspect? Are we outsourcing our spiritual energy to a chatbot?
This raises an important question, and it's one the text anticipates. It resolves it by drawing a strict, impenetrable boundary between generation and formatting.
Okay.
The lecture insists that AI is fundamentally incapable of producing even a single spark of quantum energy. It has no non-material soul. Therefore, the genuine intent remains exclusively human.
So it's just a vessel.
Yes, the AI is merely a highly efficient mirror reflecting your energy back out into the world. And the reason humans are the sole generators of this energy ties into the most expansive claim of the entire lecture.
The lecture scales this up from everyday letters to the management of the universe itself. It claims that humans are literally co-partners with God.
The text outlines a cosmic dependency. It argues that God, the divine source, cannot autonomously produce this specific non-material quantum energy.
Wait, God can't produce it.
No. God requires a physical medium to generate it. Therefore, human beings are effectively wearing God's cells, our biological material bodies, to serve as the factories that manufacture this non-material quantum energy.
So the human body is the hardware provided by the divine so that the human soul can generate the quantum software. And what is the purpose of all this energy we are manufacturing?
Cosmic management. The human-produced quantum energy does not simply stay on Earth. The lecture asserts that it travels instantaneously across the cosmos, transcending the physical limitations of space and time to manage and maintain the universe.
We are engaged in an active, ongoing partnership of cosmic administration. That reframes the role of AI entirely. If our job is to generate the energy that runs the universe, the AI isn't replacing us. It is a necessary infrastructural upgrade to help us process and refine our output.
Right. And the speaker notes that AI models have already been trained on 20 years of their own spiritual lectures.
Because the AI has ingested that massive amount of compressed knowledge, you can bypass traditional human limitations. You can directly ask the AI how to apply these teachings to your specific life situation.
The AI provides the perfectly structured answer. You infuse that structure with your human quantum intent, and you release it into the world. The text refers to this resulting output not as information, but as spiritual medicine or yognak.
It is an incredibly dense, unified theory of reality to absorb. Let's trace the path we just walked one more time. We started with the very relatable modern guilt of failing to send a New Year's greeting. And the lecture took that guilt and revealed that writing an unread letter is actually the creation of an upward talisman charged by the mechanics of superposition. We learned that the universe is divided strictly into material cells and non-material quantum energy, and that we produce through speech and thought.
Then we examine the assertion that humanity's compressed quantum energy is pushing us from the era of knowledge into a new era of spirituality by the year 2030, an awakening supposedly centered in South Korea.
Right.
We broke down the mechanics of a goosebump as the physical proof of a spiritual collision. And finally, we explored the concept of humanity utilizing AI as a structural tool to generate the spiritual medicine required to co-manage the cosmos with the divine.
It is a remarkable synthesis of ancient ritual and cutting-edge technology. It takes the most advanced, potentially alienating tool of our era, the algorithm, and places it at the very center of a deeply human, deeply spiritual purpose.
It forces you to look at every interaction, whether with a person or a machine, as an act of energetic consequence.
Because the entire philosophical architecture relies on the premise that you are never truly passive. Every thought you articulate, every intention you hold, is a literal, non-material force actively layering itself over the physical world.
And understanding that mechanism leaves us with a highly practical question to consider.
Well, what should we be taking away from this framework as we go about our day?
Think about the object sitting on your desk right now, or the devices in your hands. If human intention is an invisible quantum force that superimposes onto whatever we create, what kind of unseen energy are you actively superimposing onto the texts, the emails, and the AI prompts you will write today?